Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Caroline.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. And Alex.
Hello. No, I can't. I was going to try to say hello world.
You're going to steal Jess's.
Hey, look, it's Be Real time.
Jess is out on a secret government mission this week. She's got some things to take care of. And so we invited Caroline to join us. You are part of the college residency. Mm-hmm. You've been here not even a year. That's right.
Yeah, it's been like 6 months.
Yeah. Okay. You and your husband Nate moved to Omaha when you joined the residency, and he's working in the college ministry as well. Anything else you can tell us that you want to tell us about yourself?
Ooh, I could disclose so much right now.
Yeah, anything.
It's going on the internet forever, though.
True. So. Yeah, no pressure. My husband and I get to work together, which is really fun. And also, I don't know, it's an interesting thing to be newly married and also spend most of your time together. And so we've learned a lot about relationships and how to handle our relationship through that.
Yeah.
I'm in a master's program right now, getting my degree in counseling. And so I'm not Jess, but maybe one day I'll be pretty close. So that's exciting.
That is exciting.
Well, thanks for hopping in kind of last minute here to help us out and have this conversation that we're going to have today. Alex, I believe that your best friend ChatGPT has prepared some questions.
Yes, it has prepared questions. There's 5 of them. I'm only going to have you pick a number 1 through 5, and then you can just answer that question. So what would you pick? 1 through 5.
I'll do number 4.
Number 4. Okay. What's a hobby or skill you've always wanted to learn, but you just haven't had a chance yet?
This is amazing. Okay, I've been thinking a lot about the hobbies I want to develop as we've started the new year. Okay. And I think I want to learn how to knit, which is totally like, I don't know, feels kind of random. I'm a 21-year-old, and so I don't know a lot of other 21-year-olds that know how to knit, but I want to learn.
What's amazing about that as well is that it is not too far off from our experience. We have some coworkers that love to knit. So if you didn't know that, Rachel, she loves to knit.
That's true. I've seen her do it.
So if your feet are cold, you can just make yourself some socks.
Exactly.
Or make yourself a hat or a sweater.
Pretty cost effective.
Yeah, I think so.
I was watching Shark Tank recently.
I love Shark Tank.
And they have there's this little knit kit where you can knit your own little animal, and it's like to teach people how to knit at all different ages. I think it's probably too expensive. It's like $40, and they send you yarn and the kit and all that to just knit your own little animal. But people of all ages are loving it. So it's true. Maybe
that's your end, though.
Yeah,
knit an animal.
I'll try to search for it. Maybe that'll be your gift for being on the podcast. We'll see.
Yeah.
Let's see how big our budget is.
So the topic we're going to be talking about today is the new way that people are searching for things on the internet. And I mean, this is kind of a study based on the way that they see Gen Z engaging with the internet and how, they're not going to Google as most people have been traditionally since about 1998. And I think it's kind of flipped Silicon Valley, the internet kind of flipped it on its head a little bit because they're like, wait, how people are not just doing what we thought they would do forever, but they're engaging with things differently. You mentioned, Caroline, you're 21, so that kind of puts you in that Gen Z category. So, now you're considered a resident expert on the podcast here for Gen Z. So it's great to have you here because I think your insight is valuable. I consider myself an elder millennial, and I've even found myself, for the most part, I Google things that are like random stats, maybe like when was the moon landing, but everything else I'm going to TikTok or YouTube or Reddit primarily for those answers. Yeah,
and we're probably in the minority for millennials because a lot of our job is working on the internet more than most people. But one of the things I always try to remind, especially when I'm talking to parents about this or different generations, is that there's digital immigrants and digital natives. And so sometimes I think just having that, I think a lot of people that are maybe digital immigrants, which is most older people, millennials and up, pre-iPhone, born pre-iPhone, or at least adolescents pre-iPhone, probably mostly identify with using Google. Like, it was a life-changing thing. Like, just Google it is kind of a phrase that they've coined about anything. That just means
it's
search
a verb
for it.
now.
Yeah. And so, but because we've spent so much time, I think, on the internet, we maybe use some of these other things a little bit more and can identify with it. But some people are like, what? You can even search on TikTok or YouTube, or some people probably have no clue what Reddit is. So we'll talk a little bit about those, a few of the stats, I think, that are part of it. Recently, an article came out from the Washington Times that just highlighted this, that people, especially Gen Z, are looking at this more. And one of the quotes from the article that just begins it is, "For a generation of internet users looking for answers, Google was the first stop, but Google became so associated with the search that its name became synonymous with the act of seeking information online. But there's a sign that times are changing." And so that's a little bit what we're talking about here. In fact, in 2021, the article said that TikTok briefly dethroned Google as the most popular domain. And so 40% of Gen Z, those people born between 1997 and 2012, prefer to discover information on platforms other than Google, according to data from the senior vice president at Google. And so it's just crazy to even consider, especially with the new generation, how they're getting it. And I think why this is a relevant conversation is because where we get information, how we mine our information might point us down different directions. It might create different understandings of how we seek truth, what is truth, how we define truth. Obviously, each platform has a different algorithm which they're feeding you, and sometimes we don't realize that we've boxed ourselves into maybe somebody else's agenda as we're searching for truth. And so I think there is a lot of pertinent discussion and understanding this and where different generations are going for truth and how we can have discernment. So
yeah, that's good. There it is. There's all the answers. Yeah. So Caroline, tell me, do you use TikTok to search for anything or anything other apps, Instagram?
Yeah, I definitely used to use TikTok to search things, and then I ended up having to get off TikTok for the sake of my screen time.
Yeah.
But I'm on Instagram, and I use Instagram quite a bit for especially news. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I receive a lot of news on Instagram. I think I search some things on Instagram, like things that relate to pop culture, or even highlights about. I've looked up a lot about what's going on over in Israel and Palestine right now, and have had a lot of news come up on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, I think for me, the benefit of something where it's like short form content like TikTok is especially if I'm like, oh, I want to look up just an easy recipe for something,
totally.
like a quick bread or something like that, and I just type it in there, and not only am I getting the recipe, but I'm like seeing someone make it in like under 60 seconds, and so it's like, okay, this is even more convenient than YouTube, because typically on YouTube you've got much more long form content, and it just gets to the point and it's convenient. But I think even during I think TikTok probably really became popular in 2020 during the pandemic, and you saw it used, I think, a lot for people that were kind of discovering the term deconstruction at that time, different things like that, and that, the people were kind of finding their tribes in a way on TikTok and things like that they identified with, and they were able to build arguments, whether that was for political purposes and people were able to kind of choose sides. It's interesting to see all that it's capable of for an app that I would say people who don't engage with it just assume it's like the dance app. That's the app that kids are dancing on, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I think TikTok replaced an app, Vine. Like, I mean, it seemed like it stepped into the space of Vine, which was a lot of dances and a lot of jump cut kind of content and very
comedy,
short form stuff. And then it's kind of taken on, this platform of its own with the search capabilities and entire influencers jumping to, straight up into that platform. And I think one of the things that people always enjoyed about it was it seemed like it was different than anything that was meta-based or owned by Google, which YouTube is, or Instagram owned by Meta. So it seemed like there was a lot of people that could start there and not have to build as much of an influencer like no one really ever figured out the TikTok algorithm. And so just random people all of a sudden were blowing up in a different way on TikTok than it seemed like they were allowed to do on a lot of other platforms. And so I think especially people in Gen Z, that overwhelmingly, not everybody in Gen Z wants to be an influencer, but more than probably any other generation are seeing that model, then want to become that, are using this quick form video stuff for search and just to find out anything from religion to cooking, like you said, Eric, to how do I use this camera or technology or reviews on, I mean, it's just endless if you're wanting to figure out new things, makeup or what. I don't search for makeup too often on there, but
it's weird that just came to the top of your head.
It's even
right
like
away,
people are like talking about, I do follow, so there's someone named Abigail that I follow on there, and she was on The Bachelor a long time ago.
Nice.
Has CIs and like a lot of like her information. She's like talking about CIs with cochlear implants, which I have a daughter that, if you didn't know, has those. And so she's giving a lot of information, but also like putting on makeup and like giving advice on like, oh, people ask me, how do I use my CI? Well, she's also like, oh, and by the way, this blush is from this company and this is why I use it. So there's even like a lot of both that happens.
Yeah, that's really true.
In that kind of world.
Now your algorithm is broken.
It's
it thinks you just want makeup tutorials.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
And I'm considering a few. But according to some research, just stats on Gen Z, it says it's the #1 search engine for more than half of Gen Z. And so 74% of Gen Z uses TikTok to search.
Wow.
And 51% of them say they actually choose TikTok over Google as their search engine. And some of the biggest reasons are, like you said, Eric, the video format of results. Feels like more relatable answers than what Google's given them, and then even personalized answers. And so I think it feels more, I think to me, I'm projecting what the allure is in some ways, but I think that personalization feels like I'm getting information from a person that I actually see rather than an organization or a company or Big Brother or whatever you see. And I think that's where, to me at least, that allure, that charm of getting an information from somebody that I can see their face rather than like a faceless, nameless algorithm that just gave me an answer. So,
Caroline, tell me a little bit about, before we talk about these other platforms, since we're on TikTok at the moment, I'd love to hear what were some of your concerns or reasons for kind of like putting TikTok away or being like, no, I'm not going to use this app, I'm going to uninstall it. Like, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, I loved TikTok, and I think it's great. It's really fun. And like we've been talking about, you can find basically anything you want on there, which is, why a lot of people are on it, I think. But for me, it was, I can laugh, I can cry, I can learn how to cook, I can learn how to do my makeup better, and I can get an update on world news all in this one place. And eventually I just found myself spending way too much time on TikTok, and that was the main reason why I wanted to get off of it. I needed some more time back, and even like if it wouldn't be interrupting, my more day-to-day life, I would look at it before I went to bed, and then all of a sudden it was 2:00 in the morning, and I had stuff to do the next day, and it was just disruptive. And I knew that I think the short form video aspect of it does that, and it really captures your attention, and you're able to see so much in what feels like a little amount of time, and then that amount of time spreads to be really broad. Whereas on Instagram, where there's Instagram Reels, but I find myself getting less trapped in the Instagram Reels because I don't know, I just don't see as much on there. Yeah, they're not as good. But even just with actual Instagram, the photo area, I get bored quicker. And so I found myself less inclined to spend hours on end there.
It's like a safer platform.
Totally, yeah. And I
just
still had access to similar things, but it was, I just had some more accountability, mostly through my boredom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost scary how good it feels like the algorithm can be to customizing to your life.
Oh
which
my gosh, yeah.
Like YouTube, obviously it'll suggest the next video. Instagram will, sometimes do that, but like sometimes on TikTok, you're like, it gives me what I want. It just keeps feeding me. Like
it gives you what you didn't know you wanted. And then you're like, why am I so fascinated by this?
Yeah,
and
you find out really obscure things that.
Well, and I think maybe you left at the right time, because at TikTok, it's changed a little bit in the last few months since they introduced like the TikTok store, and it's felt like the For You page has been almost 50% advertisements for things that people are selling in the TikTok store. I think they're starting to fix that a little bit, but it hasn't really been a great experience for users either. As far as I can tell, it seems like people aren't getting things they're ordering and stuff, but it was their way of trying to kind of compete with Amazon, because a lot of people were building their presence on there and selling products and pointing people to Amazon. And I think TikTok saw the opportunity to say, well, what if we kept them in the app so they don't leave and they buy the thing from our store? But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if they corner that market. Right now, they have not done a great job at it. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about YouTube. I think that was the one that we heard about, I think, even the last couple of years, that more and more people are moving to YouTube for search. I think definitely for me, it's anytime I need to fix something, or I want to see someone's reaction to something, something new, and whether that's news or new content that's released, like a movie or an album or a video game or things like that. That's usually where I'm spending a lot of time there. Or even video podcasts have become really popular there. But yeah, I would say for the stuff when I'm like kind of more settled in, and I'm like, I want to find information about a thing or learn a new skill or whatever it might be, I'm going to YouTube. Do you guys interface with YouTube that way, or is it solely for entertainment, or not at all? I'm curious. Go ahead, Caroline, if you have an answer.
I'm trying to think. Like, I think I have the YouTube app downloaded on my phone, but I don't know the last time I used it.
So you're not.
So I'm not a big YouTube
you're like
girl.
Instagram.
Yeah, I'm pretty much exclusively Instagram.
You're on YouTube right now.
True, I guess. Yeah, I guess I am right now.
YouTuber.
Yeah, I recently. This is kind of embarrassing, but recently I started using Facebook more. Because I wanted to start selling some of my things on Facebook Marketplace.
Oh, okay.
And then I found myself getting trapped on Facebook Reels, which are even worse than Instagram Reels. But I don't really use YouTube very much.
Which explains why you want to start knitting now. That you're on
True, yeah.
a lot of knitting groups on Facebook,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, YouTube, for me, is probably one of the larger, search engines that I'm using right now. And maybe it's because, as I was in college and doing a lot more research-based stuff, I needed like data more. And now in my life, like the stage of life I'm in, I'm not always mining data. I'm not like doing research, or my research looks different when I'm doing it. So it is like I know how to change the brakes, but I don't know how to on this, new car that I have, or how do I get this bolt off that's stuck onto something,
right.
or like just looking for that wealth of knowledge. And I'm so much more of a visual learner.
Yeah.
So even if I found that same thing in like a forum, which there's been forums, and we'll talk about that more later. For me, seeing that done firsthand, especially by somebody that's done it really well.
Right.
And I've become like such a snob, like over like thumbnails and like those types of like, I'm like, I assume if the thumbnail is not good and it doesn't have a lot of views, then I'm not even going to watch it, because like the people have spoken and judged this in some kind of way by their views or not.
Yeah, right.
If this is going to be valuable. And then I'll look at the time, on how long it is. And
yeah, if you answer this in 3 minutes, that'd be great.
Or I'm just like checking out the chapters. Okay, because still YouTube, there is so much of an economy of like the first 30 seconds. And creators are getting better at that, but like the first 30 seconds being that same intro and, their jingle and all that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, get past all of it.
Well, and they reward watch time. So a lot of times creators are they benefit from making the video longer, even if it doesn't need to be. And so they try to keep people engaged that way. I would say even for me, YouTube has replaced a lot of different forms of entertainment. I find myself going to YouTube more, like even if I go sit on the couch and I'll turn on the, like an Apple TV or something, and I'll go to YouTube and just start looking up stuff like what's in the news today. And I think the algorithm there has started to curate my interests well enough that usually I open that and I'm always seeing something that I want to watch or I want updates on. And so it's kind of interesting how that has happened. And I think it just depends where people go and how they intersect with that stuff.
Well, it's become a a social site. I mean, I think when YouTube was originally created, you know, it was so much about, you know, for some people, just a storage, you know, place for their videos. Now I can put my baby, you know, walking for the first time on the internet, and now grandma can see it. And there was so much.
Yeah.
And now it's become that entertainment kind of platform, which a lot of, obviously, I mean, cable and all those things are not entertainment forms. So many companies are just dumping so much money into YouTube advertising or into partnerships with, you know, certain YouTubers, and it's become that place for a lot more of that interpersonal kind of stardom to take place. According to research, it's the second largest search engine with over 5 billion videos viewed each day. Like not even just views, 5 billion videos viewed each day, which is just wild to consider. It's the most popular social site for 12 to 17-year-olds. 96% of U.S. teens are on YouTube, according to Forrester Research and Marketing Dive. So, but it makes sense. My kids, all of them know what YouTube is. I mean, from my 4-year-old to my 11-year-old, and they all like are searching totally different content, but it's content that's like curated or, you know, made to pique their interest, and it can just be endless. You know, Coco Melon, whoever invented Coco Melon was like a genius, or
an evil genius.
Evil genius for sure. But it's just amazing the amount of content. Like people don't have to go through labels or any of that kind of stuff anymore. You can just kind of release it on your own, and it's crazy what you can find on there.
So would you say, for you, Caroline, what's your, if Instagram's your place to go, is there another way that you consume entertainment, or like Netflix or anything like that? Or is it mostly kind of like, if I'm going to zone out, I'm probably going to go to Instagram, and that's kind of...
Yeah, if I go to zone out on my phone, it's definitely Instagram. Yeah. I think if I zone out elsewhere, if I watch TV, I use Netflix or other streaming services, but I don't. And I've noticed this more. I think that, in my experience at least, I think that men are more prone to YouTube.
Yeah.
And I just have heard a lot more men talk about, I'm going to go home and watch YouTube.
Yeah.
And girls are more likely to say TikTok or Instagram or something else, which isn't exclusive, but like to that. But yeah, I wonder if there's like a gender thing in there too.
That's interesting. Yeah, what anecdotal evidence we're discovering.
Yeah,
here.
I don't know.
There's something there. Yeah. Okay. So then one of the other platforms that I think we've seen grow a lot over the years, and it's still kind of maintained some anonymity in a way, or some at least it's independence in a lot of ways. It doesn't feel like it's ran by some big company, even though it has become its own entity, is Reddit. And I know for me, this is yet another platform I use quite frequently, but a lot of times this is kind of where I want to go. Okay, for very, very niche specific questions I have about things, and then also you can find them there, and because people are discussing them, it's kind of like a message board, and people can post their question, people can answer it, or people can post content and people react to it. But you're able to find, a lot of times you're able to find kind of personal takes on something, or people respond to things from a much more personal, vulnerable place. But also I think Reddit can be a pretty toxic environment too. A lot of negative content, a lot of like ganging up on people for certain things. Also, like it's kind of like where the internet sleuth community was birthed, where a lot of people are like trying to solve crimes.
Interesting.
There's just a lot going on there. I don't even know the number of subreddits now, but if you're not familiar with it, like a subreddit is, it's like Reddit/r/whatever topic it is. It could be makeup. It could be one specific. It could be. I'm sure there's a subreddit for LaCroix and Coke churches and church fails and politics. Everything. I mean, you can just there's a community out there for pretty much anything that you can possibly imagine. Which is, I mean, a lot of times now I'm noticing my Google searches are resulting in YouTube or Reddit results at the top a lot of times.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I'm pulled to Reddit a lot.
And I think that the other unique thing about Reddit is it feels like you or users are more in control. I mean, at the end of the day, all of those probably feel like that. But like you can vote up, the best answer, kind of like reviews or whatever.
Yeah,
and
sure.
so, if you're posting about something and, I'm just in the phase of life, I fix my cars a lot, or I'm needing to do some kind of project. So a lot of times, you're looking to see other people that have had the same issue, and, the top answers are kind of the ones that are voted up. But then people just go nuts on there, like being toxic, and you follow a thread long enough and you're like, oh my gosh, this is just a hot mess. But I think the anonymity is something that's feels different about Reddit, because it's not really a video. I mean, you can post videos, you can do that kind of stuff, but it's not necessarily video content. It's not your face. You don't even have to use your name. So there's a lot of people that have kind of created these profiles or personas that are, based around anonymity and things that they maybe would never say in positive ways and negative ways in person, in real life. And so I think that's the other thing that is interesting about Reddit and how it's gained popularity. And it's probably the one out of all these that people are like, what the heck is that? They don't know. I mean, it's forum based, which is just helpful, like you said, for a lot of niche stuff, Eric. But you can find out a lot of information, or it'll send you, maybe to a lot of YouTube, or send you to, a helpful video. But almost any time, like you said, Caroline, I search something on YouTube, especially.
You mean Google?
Google.
Yeah.
Search something on Google. Yes. Then, man, most of those search results are like sending me to a Reddit link, which I find myself into.
Do you have much experience with Reddit, or do you kind of avoid those results on Google? Or is it like, oh, if it's helpful, I'll go there? But
yeah, I think it really depends what I'm searching for.
Yeah.
If I'm looking up something about news or something that, I don't know, just feels a little bit more concrete, I would probably avoid Reddit.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking for, best movies that are new on Netflix, I would totally click a Reddit thread or whatever I don't even know, like whatever it's called, and look there, because it feels like it's more real people telling me that.
Yeah, you're getting real opinions in the moment. And I do think, like you mentioned, Alex, the upvotes and downvotes is such a unique system. It's a way where it's less of an algorithm feeding you content, but more of like crowdsourced information. So if you can kind of subscribe to those different subreddits, and then when you open the app and you're kind of on the homepage, you're seeing from those different communities what people have upvoted. And it's definitely a different take. I think the thing with Reddit that you have to kind of caution people on is that it kind of prides itself in the lack of censorship. I mean, it does protect against like mature content, but it is also kind of one of the last bastions of, very mature, inappropriate content. So, I mean, if you have someone who's a kid of yours in the house that's on Reddit a lot, you might want to check out like what they're looking at, because it can be kind of a shady place for that sort of stuff. Lastly, we've talked about it several times, but we haven't, really devoted a lot of time to Instagram. But let's maybe just kind of cover some of the ways that we're seeing people interact with it. I know I was just having a conversation earlier today with someone about how, we both use Instagram a lot for checking out a restaurant before we go there. Like, oh, I've heard this place is good. And then you go and look because you want to see their food. You want to see the ambiance. You kind of like, oh, this is served on a paper plate, or this is served on a nice, whatever it is. Or even other businesses. I know I've heard a lot of people saying, hey, even if you're not going to post a lot, just use Instagram kind of as like a landing page for your business, and post 9 things that kind of explain the business to people and help them know what it's about, because a lot of people are using and discovering businesses on Instagram. So I think that's a huge thing. Have you seen other uses? I know you mentioned a few, but is there anything else where you're like, this is super helpful for using Instagram?
Yeah, I don't know if I have any additional things other than what we've already talked about. I will say, though, I definitely look up businesses and restaurants before, especially like I went to get my haircut last week, and I am new-ish to Omaha, and so I was like, where do I get my haircut around here?
Yeah.
And I looked up some people on Google, and I went to the, how good their reviews were. And then after that, I went to see if they had an Instagram page. And the ones that didn't have an Instagram page, even if they had 5 stars on Google, I was like, I'm not going to go to them. I can't see what kind of things they've done. If I would like this person, like I'm not going to give my money there.
I think that even is applicable to us in the church world. The reason why people are like, why are you taking photos in the atrium, and why are you doing this and that? And it's like you want people to be able to go to your Instagram account and either see themselves in an experience, or at least know what kind of experience they could potentially have when they visit. So it is really important.
Yeah, I did that literally like 6 months ago, or before we moved. We didn't really know where we were going to land, but we knew we were moving to Omaha. And so I remember my husband just Googled like churches in Omaha. We found Christ Community through that. And then I pulled up their Instagram and I saw the pictures and I was like, it looks like people have a great time here. Let's watch them online. And it's just cool to see how a social media platform can have that deep of an influence on people.
And I get to do like our one-on-one 101, our kind of our inroad with a lot of new people that come through Christ Community that are interested in, taking a step to serve or find out more about, and that, like, I hear that story over and over and over. And it doesn't even matter necessarily, it's not just a Gen Z thing. It's like everybody has been to our website, everybody has, been to our Instagram or whatever their preferred, social media platform is. It's almost like it legitimizes what you're doing, and then also, helps people feel like, I see myself there. Oh, it looks like it's fun, and just keep taking that next step. And so, man, we've seen people from like 6 months that are, that's when they began the search, and then you're building a lot of trust. No longer is like the front doors of our atrium at Christ Community Church. Very rarely is that someone's first experience with who we are. They've seen us online, they've watched sermons online, they've seen our social media content, and this is like, the 5th step into walking into the door. And so I think it's a big thing that a lot of people don't realize how essential that is for so many people discovering us as a church as well.
Well, and even one of the things that we hadn't really touched on with all those platforms is maybe just a little bit, but the way the influencer economy works. And I think you see that probably more prevalent, or maybe more obviously I think it's prevalent everywhere, but it's more obvious in Instagram, and how there's a lot of influencers, a lot of young women on there who are making a living selling products, like that's their whole career.
Yeah.
And I think that's like anything. It's like when we kind of have this, I don't know, it's like this vapid, hollow thing out there of people representing products, and even younger people being so sucked into that culture and that idea that, oh, I could be this influencer and I could make a living just traveling and shopping and posting pictures of it and stuff. And it's interesting, but it's also kind of like deceiving in some ways that people I think you've seen younger people not realize kind of the dark side of that, and that, hey, maybe what you're finding isn't authentic. Maybe what you're finding isn't real, and maybe what you're finding is kind of harmful. But I think there's been a trend ever since the internet of people trying to discover information, and I think we should take a look at some of the historical trends of discovering information and things like that. One of them is, libraries, encyclopedias, all these things that we don't even consider anymore.
Seem archaic at this point.
Phone books, like
magazine
I just think about
racks. That was like how you knew what was happening in the world was like what was in that magazine rack as you're like walking, to check out your groceries. You're like, oh.
I was the guy that would go to like a Borders and just hang out and read magazines because they were just there. You didn't have to pay for them, and they'd just let you look at them. That's such a weird thing to even think about.
I had a Sports Illustrated for Kids subscription that was actually sent to my home.
Yeah,
and I had posters and all. Yeah, like that's how I found out everything once a month.
Our phone books in general is such a weird thought that we had to do that. You had to thumb through the phone book to find anything, any business, anyways. Making us old. Have you used a phone book ever?
I have. It's not like a few times
to find a number or like
used.
as a paperweight or something.
Definitely
doorstop.
like door stops, sitting on them in the car when I was too small. Yeah, mostly stuff like that. Very few times did I really thumb through it for an actual number.
That's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I think still to this day things like libraries are very beneficial to the community, but a lot of times people are going there because they don't have access to the internet, so they've become just a place to go and gain access to the internet. Newspapers, that's the thing that's kind of, it feels like this dying thing where you can't even go to a website of a newspaper without getting some pop-up forcing you to subscribe, which makes sense because at least before, to read it, you were paying your 75 cents, $1.25, whatever it was, to get your newspaper, and now they're struggling to survive without people having subscriptions.
Well, I think it was this week that I saw Sports Illustrated. It's going under. Like they fired like all of the like everybody, and so I think if you would have told me in like the 90s when Nebraska was good at football and on covers of Sports Illustrated that this thing was going to like ever sink, I'd have thought that was crazy. But now, I'm like, when was the last time I looked at
a magazine,
a Sports Illustrated magazine?
Yeah, even thinking about that makes me wonder, like right now, these things like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok are so popular, and we can't imagine them going under. And maybe in 20 years, someone else will be sitting in this chair talking about this other thing.
Yeah.
And now Instagram's dead. It's just crazy just to think about these things.
We can just look at MySpace as an example.
That's a great example.
Or some of these other search engines. I mean, if you think about it, like Yahoo was the first search engine, and it was like in 1994, so it was about 4 years before Google, and it was pretty rudimentary, and then Google came and kind of changed the game, and then later you saw stuff like Ask Jeeves and Bing.
Yeah, Microsoft was trying to get on it, I think, with Bing.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a thing that some people use because they want their Bing points, and now they're trying to get into AI and all of that stuff. I think during the pandemic, when there was a lot of misinformation, or people felt that Google had political bias in their search results, they were going to like DuckDuckGo and things like that. And one of the cautions I always had with people with using stuff like DuckDuckGo is Google, you may not like everything about Google, and that's fine, but one of the things that they do is they make sure that the results that they're feeding you are not malware or some other sort of phishing scam or something like that. They're pretty good at making sure that they're not sending people to illegitimate websites.
Yeah.
And with something like DuckDuckGo, where you could search for something, and a lot of times it's older generations who would use those search engines because they were getting marketed as the Freedom search engine or something like that.
I have a friend whose dad exclusively uses DuckDuckGo because he doesn't trust Google.
Yeah, and it's actually more dangerous to use that because you could be going to something that's going to be stealing your passwords or who knows what. So it's like,
especially for a person that's not internet savvy and they have no clue and they're just doing it. That's a place that a lot of people are able to prey on others, and they know it because it protects them. And so. But yeah, then Google just took over, and I think that's part of it too. Is at the end of the day, a lot of this becomes about money. So much of our culture becomes about at people making money. So whether it's TikTok, it seemed like it was this very organic, mysterious almost, like who's behind it. Not a lot of ads. Just you were able to just exist out there and not. And now they're, trying to have their own store. Once platforms grow to a certain point, it's like, now there's advertisement. Now, even for me on Instagram, I'm like, I hardly see all the posts of the people I follow because it's feeding me. Like at one point, you used to only see exclusively who you followed, and on Facebook. And all the time on Facebook, I see older people that are convinced that they copy and paste something, and they're going to only, once again, see only their friends' stuff. And it just doesn't work like that. Because the algorithms and the business side behind it, and at the end of the day, a lot of it's just driven by money and organizations buying these types of things, and then organizations that are driven by money can, be driven by an agenda and all that kind of stuff. And so then we get into this place of, so how do we start to mine it? How do we start to have wisdom? How do we start to, have these kinds of conversations that lead people that are confused, that don't understand why their kids are doing it, all that kind of stuff, that are part of a different generation? How do we start to have discipleship, I guess, conversations around, this kind of stuff, and give some tips and tools maybe that are just handy from places that we can check out to figure out, hey, is this leading me to real true information, or is it leading me down a rabbit hole that is being controlled by someone with an agenda? How do we figure all some of these kind of things out? And what is truth? Where do I actually find truth? There's so many times that, we get two different people that honestly are seeking the same truth, but the place that they're getting their information from is just biased in some way. And so they can't even agree on any kind of common ground because where they're being fed truth has some sort of spin to it. And so how do we start to just have those discipleship conversations? If you're sitting down with like a college student that's wrestling through all these things and wanting to know more about Jesus, and they're looking at TikTok, they're looking at Reddit, like how do you start to have those conversations with them?
Yeah, I think it's always insightful to know where they're starting from. What beliefs do they personally hold that they have going into it? Confirmation bias is a huge thing that a lot of us don't even know is happening when we go to search something and decide what to click on and what not to. And so I think just recognizing that we're all prone to something, even in our lack of knowledge, just really guides what knowledge we do come upon. And I think it's also important too to just, I think wise researching requires using multiple sources that are really different. If you exclusively get the news from CNN, your view of the things that you're finding information about is going to be a lot different than if you used CNN and Fox and NBC and whatever else. And so I think it's important to be not only informed but well informed.
Yeah, that's good. How are you? You're raising some Gen Zers, Eric. Like, how are you? Trying to have these conversations and as they're using these platforms, which isn't all bad. How do you start to navigate some of that with them?
It's interesting because you want, at least for me as a parent, I want my children to feel like, not even feel like is a bad way to say it. I want them to experience autonomy. I want them to know what it's like to have the freedom to discover and learn, and I want them to be curious. So sometimes putting up those guardrails, can feel restrictive, but you as a parent, you have to also protect your children from things. And so it's a lot of times it's kind of like letting them investigate stuff on their own, but keeping the conversation open and helping, sometimes something will come up and maybe one of them will say something and I'll be like, okay, all right, what do you mean by that? Or where did you hear that? Or why do you think that? And, just kind of diving in a little deeper, because I think it's interesting at even a pretty young age, they start to develop these opinions, and it's like, well, where are you hearing that? Because that's not what we talk about at the house here. Like, how are you, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but a big thing for me is trying to help them understand the identity politics and how that really hurts them, and they shouldn't get involved in that, and taking a side in these social media arguments or political arguments or whatever it may be. It all that really does is help benefit capitalistic marketing companies and things like that. Like, all you're doing is picking a side so that someone can market to you, and at the end of the day, you don't want to be that. Like, you want to be able to look at both sides of a conversation and make a wise decision and be empathetic to both sides. And, sometimes that's tough. Like, we'll have conversations about all sorts of things, whether it's politics or veganism or, whatever, sexuality, things like that, where we're diving into that and trying to understand, like, how can we interface with this? Because this is what you're going to continue to do the rest of your life, and you can't live in isolation, and you have to engage with that. So, as someone I feel like I've fallen victim to it myself. Sometimes you fall into an echo chamber, or like you were talking about with confirmation bias. It's so easy to get wrapped up into that. Like you're like, I feel so strongly about this that even the way you word your searches are influenced by that, and you're typing in something that you're hoping to get a result.
Prove me right.
Yeah, prove me right sort of thing. Yeah, that's true. So it's tough to avoid, but I think there are ways to. I think, Caroline, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Is like balance what you're seeing with other information out there, and I think one thing that I've always tried to do is just challenge myself to look at the thing that I disagree with and try to find any good in it. Like, is there something in there that's good, and can I find any truth in it? And I think you will challenge yourself and you'll make yourself uncomfortable, but I just think it's really valuable. I think you have to live that way. And I think if you want to be close to people, if you want to have a strong witness to the world, like you have to be able to relate to people and understand why they feel this way, why they think this way. And I'm, I guess, a proponent of that. So I think it's really important.
And I think, at the end of the day, why have a conversation about YouTube and Google and where people are finding their information? And ultimately, it's because where we find information, all of these platforms are discipling us. Whether we call it discipling or not, all of these are shaping our lives. They're shaping our thoughts. They're shaping how we see ourselves in comparison to others. They're shaping the dreams that we have. They're shaping the patterns that are happening inside of our lives. And so oftentimes we don't, we wouldn't call TikTok a discipleship platform, or somebody listening on YouTube, or we wouldn't call those discipleship platforms, but ultimately that's what they are.
Right.
They're shaping us into the image of someone or something else, and our thoughts and all of those things. And so I think why having these kind of conversations is important, especially if you have kids or you've got grandkids, or you're interacting, and hopefully you are, with somebody in a different generation, realizing the biases that we bring to things, but also, being proactive about this kind of stuff. I think far too often in parenting, but also in discipleship, we're just reactive to things, and then now we're on our heels instead of being proactive about, hey, what are the things actually happening here? How do we, have these conversations with tact and wisdom? How do we make sure our kids or people around us are comfortable having these kinds of conversations with us? That's so key in developing good, strong, healthy relationships, and you're going to be challenged in them. And so I know I say this all the time, but one of the best resources that I think you can find is axis.org. As far as from a Christian perspective, every single week they send out an email that's kind of got things that are trending in youth culture and Netflix and songs that are trending, and you'll know all about Swifties and like all those kinds of things that are happening, words that are being introduced, and it's got great just questions to be asking. And it's good outside of just if you have kids, but it's just a great resource of, people that are being proactive and looking at culture and thinking about, this is happening around us. We can't just hide, ourselves in some place, but we have to be proactive about, what does that mean? And how do I start to ask those questions to my kids or to my neighbors or whatever? And so I think that's a big thing to.
Caroline, I'm curious, like, what are some of the, even with the way you interface with the college ministry and things like that, what are the things you're seeing and that people are really struggling with in their lives? How are and maybe like, what are some of the things they're learning or that you're learning from them, and how to not only keep them safe, but just maybe keep them sane, and, not from just like engaging in arguments and, things like that.
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone, even within a category or an age group, like kids that are in college right now. I think it's really important for people to know when to turn it off. I've felt that in myself, and I've heard just people I'm close to, college students I'm close to, talk about that too. A lot of times, like anything, being on social media, for example, it can start out really well, and then when you're doing a super deep dive and you're at the bottom of the Reddit thread, you can really see some dark stuff, or kind of just get lost in kind of this alternative world that you become part of when you engage in things like social media. And you can I think you can lose some of your inhibitions maybe, and the things that keep you from engaging in arguments like maybe you would with real people and things like that. And so I'm really big on screen time. I don't have kids. I don't live with my parents, but I have a screen time limit on my phone because I know I need that.
You don't just bypass it and keep going?
Sometimes I do, but for the most part, I really try to follow it. And like for me, it's set up if I use my allotted time in the day on this set amount of apps, like it's done. I don't have the option to bypass it. It's set by a password that I don't know. And that's been really helpful for me.
That's good.
So I not only can I not stay up all night, scrolling into the deep, dark interweb.
Yeah.
But also I know that, okay, I have 40 minutes a day to spend on all my social media platforms like combined. And so if I see something on Instagram that I like, great, I'll like it. I'll look at it a little bit. I'll save it for later. But kind of in the back of my head the whole time, I'm knowing like, okay, I don't have a lot of time right now. So I'm going to X out and do something else so that way I can save my time for later. And even in that, it prevents me from going on this super deep dive and scrolling through all the comments on this post about what's going on in the world that is controversial. And it prompts me to just expand my worldview a little bit. And, okay, I don't have time to look up every single thing on Instagram every day. So instead, what else can I use to find information? And that is a helpful way to just be reminded to use multiple sources. And so that's what's helpful for me. I've noticed some similar things with college students. Not all of them have, time restrictions on their phone, which is great and fine. But yeah, I think I've noticed a lot of, just desire to use multiple sources and use wise judgment when interacting with other people.
That's great. I think as we wrap it up, one note I would add is just, I think a lot of times, we're as human beings, we kind of have this desire for truth. And so when we're searching for things, I think that's what part of being a creation of a creator who's, wants us to have that opportunity. And so I think searching is great. Being able to find that stuff at your fingertips is really helpful. But I also think it's like, be in community, have checks and balances. I think sometimes it's easy to get isolated and just form opinions and say them, and other people are kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, you need the checks and balances. On the flip side, I think it's also important too to consider things like net neutrality, and when those things come up, personally, I would believe that you should be in support of that, because we don't really have another place to go if corporations start to own the internet and control what we see. Yeah. So it's like, and I think on both sides of the political sphere, I see people kind of take this in the wrong way sometimes, but it's like net neutrality is important because you don't want the internet to just become like your cable TV service provider or something like that, where they're just choosing what you get to see and you're paying them for that. And so having that freedom, there is a cost and there is accountability, and there are things that we have to kind of manage ourselves, and doing things like honoring our own screen time and, and having accountability with friends or spouses or with your children and things like that. It's really important. But I don't know, that's the part of me where like the internet is always kind of magical to me, because I'm just like, everything is out there. And I do think it's amoral, like you said, Alex, but it is, and it's a very valuable tool, but it can be used for bad. But I don't know. It's one of those conversations a little gray, but I think that all of this is, like you even mentioned, Caroline, it's all going to change in 10 years anyways, and we're going to be searching on who knows what, maybe our Apple Vision Pros, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think as followers of Jesus, I think it's important to know, like, as we do have a foundation of truth. I mean, Jesus says He is the way, He is the truth, He is the life. That no one comes to the Father except through Him, and so we have a foundation of truth that we're building everything from there. And so oftentimes if we're trying to build everything from the internet or trying to find all of our wisdom, James tells us if anyone lacks wisdom, you should ask God. And he is longing for you to ask him, to Google him, whatever, to come to him with the problems in your life, and ask him how to solve them. And that he longs to, like a good father, be there and give wisdom and give advice generously. He's not holding back. Like, he's actively longing for it. Like, I think of, my kids, when I want them to come to me, and when something happens to them, when someone's mean to them or they have a great thing, I want them to come to me, and I want to give them my thoughts and advice on it. And so I don't want them to like go to the internet first and then formulate an opinion. And then once they have that opinion formulated, then say, hey, what do you think about this opinion, that I've spent the last 5 years developing? I want to be one of the first places that they're coming to gain wisdom. And also know, like you said, I want them to explore, to have that curiosity and for some confirmation to come from other places as they're seeking truth. And I think if they're seeking truth, that's got a standard of Scripture and, from God, that they will find, they'll find that truth. If they keep knocking and seeking, then they will continue to find. And I think that's why there's going to be temptations out there, and Jesus oftentimes used Scripture,
right?
To fight his temptation when he was depleted, when he was fasting for 40 days. It wasn't some new revelation, but it was past revelation that Jesus was often, reciting. And so I think it's just wise to invite the Holy Spirit into this process. I'm assuming that's what led you to have some screen time, is like, okay, I want to look more like Jesus, and is this going to help me get there, or is it going to hurt me from getting there? And it can help in some ways, but also with limits and guidelines. And so asking the Spirit to be a part of this. And there's a lot of great things. I just think that we don't realize that Gen Z is doing that's contrary to a lot of other generations. Like, they're sleeping, having sex less, outside of marriage. They're drinking alcohol less. They're smoking. Like, there's so many of those things that I think the church in general was like, these are the worst things ever. And like, this is a generation doing that a lot less. And I think part of it is because they're finding good information about what this does to their bodies, what it does to them on the internet. And they're learning from their parents' mistakes who didn't do those things very well. And so there's a lot of hopeful things, I think, in this generation, and wisdom that we could actually learn from, which I think is cool too.
Well, Caroline, thank you. Thanks for hopping in here last minute and just joining us for this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been good. If anyone's listening and has any questions or concerns, you can always reach out to us on social media. You can find us on TikTok or Instagram at CCCOMA Podcast, or you can leave us a voicemail, 402-885-9930. We'd love to hear from you there. Or finally, you can send us an email, as always, to podcast@cccomaha.org. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.